The Nazis had no idea that two sisters, aged 16 and 7, were hiding 13 Jews in their home for years. The Podgorska sisters, July 1943, 7:23 a.m., Tatarska Street 3, Przemyśl, Poland. Oberscharführer Franz Müller climbed the stairs to the small two-room apartment with barely concealed irritation. Another routine inspection. Another address on the endless list of residences that had to be searched for hidden Jews. "A woman lives here with a little girl," the Polish collaborator guiding them reported. Stefania Podgorska, 16, orphan, taking care of her younger sister. Miller paid little attention. A teenage girl alone with a small child. Not a threat. Probably just another search that would turn up nothing. Another hour wasted in a city where the Jews were supposedly already gone. Wiped out of the ghetto months earlier. He knocked. A young girl opened the door, pale-faced, eyes anxious. Behind her, a little girl of about 7 clung to her skirt. "Inspection," Müller announced without ceremony. "Show me your papers." What Müller didn't know, what the Gestapo would only learn after liberation, when the survivors finally emerged, was that less than 3 meters from where he stood, in a tiny attic, accessible only through a hidden trap door in the ceiling of a wardrobe, 13 people were holding their breath inside a space barely 2 meters by 3. 13 Jews who had lived there, unseen, impossibly, for 2 full years. And those 13 people were alive because 2 girls, a 16-year-old and her 7-year-old sister, had decided that hiding them was simply what you did when your neighbors needed help. This is the story of how 2 orphan sisters, with no resources, no experience, no adult support, built and sustained one of the most improbable rescue operations of the Holocaust. How a teenager became the provider for 15 people while deceiving Nazis who came to her home regularly. And how the love between 2 sisters proved stronger than the entire machinery of genocide that tried to destroy the people they protected. The life before the war. Przemyśl, a Polish city of 60,000 on the border with Ukraine, had been home to a thriving Jewish community for centuries. By 1939, about 17,000 Jews lived there, nearly a third of the population. Merchants, artisans, doctors, teachers, families who had built lives over generations. Stefania Podgorska was born on November 5, 1926, in a small village near Przemyśl. She was the eldest of 9 children in a poor Catholic family. Her father died when she was 12. Her mother, overwhelmed by poverty and responsibility, sent Stefania to work as a domestic servant in Przemyśl when she was 13. It was a common fate for poor village girls to work in the homes of wealthier families, sending a minimal wage back home. Stefania was hired by the Diamant family, prosperous Jews who ran a textile shop. The Diamants treated her well, more like a junior member of the household than a servant. She ate with them, learned from them, developed genuine affection, especially for Ezio Diamant, the son who was about her age. In 1939, when Stefania was nearly 13, her younger sister Helena, only 3, was sent to live with her. Their mother could not care for 9 children with limited resources. The 2 sisters shared a small room in the Diamant's home. It was a strange arrangement, but it worked. Stefania worked. Helena grew up surrounded by relative comfort. The sisters formed an extraordinarily close bond, united by the reality that they were essentially alone in an adult world. On September 1st, 1939, Germany invaded Poland. Because of its strategic location near the Soviet border, Przemyśl was initially occupied by the Soviet Union under the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. The Soviets confiscated businesses, arrested intellectuals, but did not implement targeted persecution of Jews. The Diamant family lost their shop but survived. Stefania continued living with them, now more as family than employee, since Soviet confiscations had erased the old class distinctions. On June 22, 1941, Germany invaded the Soviet Union. By July, German troops had taken Przemysl. The Nazi occupation immediately began implementing anti-Jewish measures. Mandatory registration, armbands with the Star of David, confiscation of property, restrictions on movement. Stefania, 14, watched with growing horror. The Diamants, who had treated her with kindness for 2 years, were now treated like animals, forced to wear humiliating identification, forbidden to walk on certain streets, beaten in public for invented infractions. In July 1942, the Nazis established a ghetto in Przemysl. About 17,000 Jews were forced into a tiny area of the city, crammed into impossible conditions. The Diamant family was moved into the ghetto. Stefania and Helena, being Catholic, were not included. "Keep our house," Mr. Diamant told Stefania before leaving. "Maybe one day we can come back." It was desperate optimism. They both knew returning was unlikely. Stefania, 15, and Helena, 6, were left alone in an empty apartment. No close family, no meaningful resources. In a city occupied by Nazis who viewed Poles as barely better than slaves. Any reasonable teenager would have fled back to her village, sought protection from family. But Stefania was not an ordinary teenager. She had developed a sense of responsibility beyond her years. She had Helena to protect. And she had, though she did not yet know it, an extraordinary capacity to survive under impossible pressure. The ghetto and the deportations. The Przemysl ghetto existed from July 1942 to September 1943. During that period, the Nazis carried out 3 massive actions. Deportations to extermination camps designed to systematically liquidate the Jewish population. First action, July to August 1942. About 7,000 Jews were deported to Belzec, an extermination camp where all were murdered immediately. Second action, November 1942. Another 3,500 Jews deported, also to Belzec. Third action, September 1943. The remaining Jews of the ghetto were deported to Auschwitz. The ghetto was officially liquidated. During this period of terror, Stefania maintained secret contact with the Diamant family. She visited the ghetto when she could, bringing food she bought with the meager wages she earned doing occasional cleaning work. She carried messages. She offered the comfort of a gentle presence in hell. It wasn't calculated heroism. It was simple loyalty to people who had been good to her. The Diamants were her family as much as her biological family was. In the spring of 1943, after the second action, Ezio Diamant contacted Stefania with a desperate proposal. "The third action will come soon," he said. "They'll deport all of us. Some of us want to hide on the Aryan side. Can you help us? Do you know a place where we can hide?" Stefania thought of the apartment she occupied. 2 small rooms. She and Helena barely fit there. Hiding additional people? It seemed impossible. But she looked at Ezio, who had treated her like a sister for years. She looked into the desperate eyes of the family she had known since she was 13. "Yes," she said simply. "You can come with me." She had no plan, no resources, no idea how she would feed or hide multiple people in such a tiny space. But she had the will to try. Building the hiding place. The apartment at Tatarska Street 3 was inadequate for any serious hiding plan. 2 small rooms on the second floor of an apartment building with neighbors on all sides. No basement, no accessible attic, no obvious space where people could vanish during raids. But Stefania, studying the apartment with new urgency, noticed something. In the ceiling, there was a small hatch that led into the attic space beneath the building's slanted roof. The space wasn't livable, barely a meter high at its highest point, but it existed. With help from Ezio and other members of the Diamant family who still had limited freedom of movement before the third action, Stefania improvised improvements. They laid boards on the attic floor to create a surface where people could lie down. They made the entrance more discreet by building a false shelf in the wardrobe that could be moved to reveal the hatch. They stored water in bottles, blankets, and buckets for sanitation. It wasn't sophisticated. There was no professional architect like Herman Schmidt in the 10-boom case. It was improvisation by a 16-year-old girl working with zero resources. Attic dimensions: about 2 meters wide, 3 meters long, with a maximum height of 1 meter. Total space: about 6 cubic meters. Theoretical capacity: maybe 4 people lying down, crushed beyond imagination. Stefania planned to hide the Diamant family, Mr. and Mrs. Diamant, Ezio, maybe a couple of additional relatives. 5 people at most. In September 1943, when the third action began and the ghetto was liquidated, 13 people knocked on Stefania's door, seeking refuge. Not only the Diamants. Other Jews who knew Stefania was helping, who had heard rumors of a Gentile willing to hide people, arrived in desperation. Families with children, elderly people, those who literally had nowhere else to go. Stefania looked at the attic she had prepared for 5. She looked at the 13 terrified faces in front of her. She looked at Helena, 7, watching without fully understanding. "Come in," Stefania said. "All of you, come in." It was a decision that would turn the next 2 years of her life into a nightmare of constant tension. 13 people in a space designed for 4. 15 mouths to feed on a teenager's income. Constant deception of Nazis, neighbors, collaborators. But she did not hesitate. People needed help. She could provide it. It was as simple as that. The 13 people who hid in Stefania's attic were the Diamant family, Mr. Diamant, Mrs. Diamant, Ezio Diamant, the Diamant's cousins family, 5 people, including 2 children. 3 additional individuals connected through family networks. 2 elderly people who had been neighbors in the ghetto. 13 people climbed up through the trapdoor in the wardrobe, squeezed into the 6 cubic meters of attic space, and vanished from the visible world. Stefania, 16, closed the hatch, slid the shelf back into place, and became the only line between those 13 lives and the gas chambers. Daily life with 13 people in hiding, managing the life of 15 people. 13 hidden plus Stefania and Helena in a 2-room apartment required a system as precise as clockwork. Stefania developed a routine that, as brutal as it was, kept everyone alive. 5 a.m. Stefania woke up. She prepared a simple breakfast: bread, water, sometimes boiled potatoes if she had money. 5:30 a.m. She opened the hatch silently. The 13 people in the attic had been lying still all night. They came down one by one to use the bathroom quickly, then climbed back up. 6 a.m. Stefania distributed food. Each person received a tiny portion. It was never enough. It could never be enough on her wages. 6:30 a.m. Hatch closed. The 13 people would spend the next 12 hours in the attic without moving, without making a sound, without using the bathroom. 7 a.m. Stefania woke Helena and got her ready for the day. Helena, 7, knew people were in the attic, but had been trained in absolute silence about it. "It's our secret," Stefania had told her. "If anyone asks, it's just you and me." 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Stefania worked, cleaning houses, washing clothes, anything she could find. Helena, too young for school under Nazi occupation, stayed alone in the apartment with strict instructions. No noise, and never opened the door to anyone. Up in the attic, 13 people lay in darkness and silence. It was impossible to move without making sounds neighbors could hear. Impossible to speak. Barely possible to breathe stale air. The children were the hardest. 2 children, 4 and 6, who had to remain completely silent 12 hours a day. Their parents held them constantly, whispering comfort, covering their mouths when they threatened to cry. 6:30 p.m. Stefania returned. She made dinner from whatever she could buy, mostly potatoes, sometimes bread, rarely meat or vegetables. 7 p.m. She opened the hatch again. The 13 came down, used the bathroom, ate the scarce dinner, moved briefly to relieve aching muscles. Those 2 hours were their only freedom. They could whisper. They could stretch. They could be human. Briefly. 9 p.m. Back into the attic. Stefania closed the hatch. The 13 arranged themselves for another night of impossible sleep in a space where lying down required careful coordination. This routine continued day after day, week after week, month after month, for 2 years. The constant challenges. Keeping 13 people hidden meant solving new problems constantly. Every problem threatened to destroy the entire operation. Problem 1. Money Stefania earned about 30 zlotys a week cleaning houses. Barely enough for 2 people to survive. Completely insufficient for 15. Food in occupied Poland was strictly rationed. Each person received coupons for a specific amount. Stefania had coupons for 2. She had to feed 15. Solution: the black market. Stefania bought bread, potatoes, sometimes meat on the black market at inflated prices, spending virtually all her wages. The 13 in the attic contributed when they could, giving hidden jewelry, concealed money that Stefania quietly sold. But it was never enough. Everyone was constantly hungry. Stefania often skipped meals entirely, giving her portion to Helena or to the children in the attic. Problem 2. Sanitation 13. People produce waste. The apartment's bathroom could only be used during short periods when they came down. For the 12 hours in the attic, they needed buckets. Stefania emptied the buckets every night. Disgusting but necessary. The smell in the attic was overwhelming, especially in summer when heat amplified everything. Several of the hidden developed urinary infections from holding it for hours. There were no doctors they could safely call. Stefania treated symptoms with home remedies that barely helped. Problem 3. Illness. In confined spaces, illness spreads quickly. When one person caught a cold, everyone had it within days. Coughing was dangerous. Neighbors could hear. Sick people bit down on blankets to silence their coughs. One woman developed pneumonia in the winter of 1943. High fever, violent coughing, delirium. Stefania couldn't call a doctor without revealing the hidden people. The woman survived by sheer luck and the rudimentary care of others who had minimal medical training. Problem 4. Mental health, 2 years when a knee. Attic 1 meter high, 12 hours a day of absolute stillness, constant terror. This produces devastating psychological trauma. One man fell into such severe depression, he stopped eating, wanting to die. Others forced him to swallow food, whispered reasons to live. Eventually, he regained enough will to continue, but never fully. The children had nightmares, waking up screaming. Their parents silenced them instantly, hands over mouths, urgent whispers. The children learned to have silent nightmares, an adaptation no child should ever develop. Problem 5. The Nazis. Multiple times during those 2 years, Nazi officials or Polish collaborating police knocked on Stefania's door for inspections. Every time, Stefania performed perfectly. An innocent teenager caring for her little sister, papers in order, the visible apartment clean and tidy, nothing suspicious. The officers never looked up at the ceiling, never noticed that a 2-room apartment seemed slightly smaller inside than it should have been based on the building's exterior. Never suspected that directly above their heads, 13 people lay utterly still, holding their breath, praying silently. During one inspection in July 1943, Oberscharführer Müller spent 20 minutes in the apartment, questioning Stefania about the neighbors, asking if she'd seen anything suspicious. The whole time, 13 people were only meters away. One woman in the attic was 7 months pregnant. Her breathing was heavy from the weight of the baby. She pressed a hand over her mouth, forcing herself to breathe shallowly and silently while Müller spoke below. Müller never knew. He left satisfied that young Podgorska was simply a poor teenager caring for her sister. The German soldier. In the autumn of 1943, a complication arose that threatened to destroy everything. A German soldier named Walter decided Stefania's apartment was a convenient place to quarter troops. The Wehrmacht, needing space for soldiers in Przemysl, regularly requisitioned apartments. Stefania's, 2 rooms and relatively central, seemed ideal. Walter arrived with orders. This apartment will now house 3 German soldiers. You can stay in one room. We'll use the other. Stefania felt pure terror. German soldiers living in the apartment meant constant presence, continuous observation, and no way to maintain the secret of 13 people in the attic. But protesting would look suspicious, so she accepted with apparent resignation. For the next weeks, 3 German soldiers lived in Stefania's apartment. They slept in one room. They ate there. They kept military equipment there. They were present almost constantly. Up above, the 13 now had to remain absolutely silent, not only during the day, but at night too. One sound, one movement detected, and the soldiers would investigate. The tension was unbearable. Stefania could barely open the hatch. The attic occupants came down only at 2 a.m. when the soldiers were deeply asleep, and only to use the bathroom as quickly as possible without running water that might wake anyone. Food became an even greater problem. Stefania couldn't visibly buy enough to feed 13 people without the soldiers asking why a teenager with a small child was purchasing so much. She cut portions down until they were almost symbolic. The hidden people began to lose weight dramatically. Hunger became so severe it hurt constantly. Some considered surrendering, coming down, accepting deportation, just to end the suffering. But Stefania kept performing perfectly. She was friendly to the soldiers, made coffee for them, cleaned their room, acted like the perfect unwilling host. The soldiers, especially Walter, grew fond of her. "You're a good Polish girl," Walter would say. "Not like those dirty Jews who used to live here." Stefania smiled, nodded, wanted to scream. This situation lasted for 2 months. 2 months in which every moment was mortal risk. Every breath from the 13 above could betray them. In December 1943, the troops were reassigned to the Eastern Front. The soldiers left. For the first time in weeks, the apartment was free of Nazis. That night, when Stefania opened the hatch, she found the 13 on the edge of physical and mental collapse. They had survived, but barely. "I don't know how you endured," Stefania told them. "Your courage gave us courage," Ezio replied. "If you could keep acting in front of them, we could keep silent up here." Helena, the little sister. Helena Podgorska was 7 when her sister began hiding 13 Jews. By the time the war ended, she was 9.5. Those 2.5 years were her entire childhood under occupation. Helena knew people were in the attic. It was impossible to hide completely. She heard occasional movement. She saw Stefania preparing food that disappeared. She understood at a basic level that her sister was doing something dangerous. Stefania explained it simply. "We're helping friends. It's secret. If anyone asks, it's just you and me." Helena, with a seriousness no 7-year-old should have, nodded. "I understand. It's our secret." For 2 years, Helena never betrayed the secret. When neighbors asked, "Is Stefania home?" Helena answered with practiced naturalness. When Nazis inspected, Helena acted like a normal child frightened by authority. When she heard sounds in the attic, she never reacted, never looked up. It was extraordinary acting for someone so young. But Helena learned quickly that a mistake meant death, not only for the hidden people, but for her and her sister too. The psychological cost for Helena was immense. She developed severe anxiety, constant nightmares, a permanent fear of saying the wrong word and destroying everything. Stefania, trying to protect Helena while simultaneously depending on her to keep the secret, faced an impossible dilemma. She couldn't give Helena a normal childhood, but she could give her love, emotional safety inside physical danger. Every night before sleep, Stefania hugged Helena and said, "You are the bravest girl I know. I'm so proud of you." Helena, 7, carrying the weight of 15 lives, would ask, "When the war ends, can we tell someone?" "Yes," Stefania promised. "When the war ends, we can tell everything." The winter of 1944. The winter of 1943 to 1944 was the worst. Food shortages intensified. Coal for heating was almost impossible to obtain. The apartment was freezing. The attic, with no insulation, was like a freezer. The 13 in the attic shivered violently at night, pressing together to share body heat. Several developed mild frostbite on their fingers. One elderly woman developed hypothermia, her body temperature dropping dangerously. Stefania secretly brought her down, warmed her beside a small stove using the last coal embers she had, and barely saved her. Hunger reached critical levels. Stefania, who normally weighed about 50 kilograms, dropped to 38. Her teenage body, still growing, was deprived of basic nutrition. She stopped menstruating. She developed severe anemia. The attic occupants were worse. Men who had weighed 70 to 80 kilograms before hiding now weighed 45 to 50. The women were skeletal. The children stopped growing entirely, development stalled by malnutrition. In February 1944, Stefania collapsed while working in someone's home. Exhaustion, starvation, and stress finally exceeded what her teenage body could bear. She was taken to a hospital where doctors diagnosed severe malnutrition and exhaustion. "You need to eat more and rest more," a doctor instructed. "You're killing yourself working." Stefania nodded, knowing she could do neither. If she didn't work, she didn't earn money. If she didn't earn money, 15 people starved. They gave her vitamin supplements and told her to return in 2 weeks. Stefania sold the supplements on the black market and used the money to buy potatoes for the 13 in the attic. It was completely unsustainable. They couldn't keep going like this. Something had to change. That change came as rumors grew louder. The Red Army was advancing. The Germans were retreating on the Eastern Front. Liberation might come soon. "We just have to hold on a little longer," Stefania told the 13. Just a little longer. But a little longer became weeks, then months, and meanwhile, they starved. Slowly, inevitably. Liberation, July 1944. The Eastern Front neared Przemyśl. Artillery could be heard in the distance. German troops began evacuating the city, moving equipment and personnel west. The city fell into chaos. Nazi authority was collapsing. Polish collaborators burned records, tried to hide evidence of complicity. Civilians hid in basements as battle approached. In the apartment at Tatarska Street 3, Stefania made a decision. If the battle reaches here, the building could be bombed. They can't stay in the attic. For the first time in 2 years, the 13 came down in full daylight. They crowded into the 2 rooms, ready to hide in closets or under beds if Nazis appeared. On July 27, 1944, Soviet tanks entered Przemyśl. The Wehrmacht retreated without significant fighting. By afternoon, the city was under Soviet control. The Nazi occupation was over. Stefania opened the apartment door for the first time in days. On the street, civilians emerged cautiously. Soviet soldiers patrolled, not threatening toward Polish civilians. "You can come out," Stefania told the 13. "It's safe. The war is over." The 13, who had lived in an attic 1 meter high for 2 years, walked into sunlight for the first time since September 1943. Their eyes, unaccustomed to bright light, hurt. Their bodies, weakened by malnutrition, trembled. Neighbors watched in absolute shock. 13 people emerging from a 2-room apartment where only a teenage girl and a small child supposedly lived. How was it possible? Ezio Diamant, who had survived because of Stefania, hugged her crying. "You saved us. You kept us alive." Stefania, 17 now, she had had a birthday during the occupation, exhausted and starving, simply said, "I did what I had to do." After the war, the months after liberation were difficult in different ways. Soviet-occupied Poland was no paradise. Polish anti-Semitism had not disappeared with the Nazis. Many Jewish survivors faced violence from Poles who resented their return or wanted to keep confiscated property. The 13 people Stefania saved gradually scattered. Some emigrated to Western countries. Several went to Palestine, later Israel. The Diamant family tried to rebuild in Poland but eventually emigrated. Stefania and Helena faced extreme poverty. Without stable income, without family support, Stefania's mother had died during the war. They survived precariously. In 1948, Ezio Diamant, who had emigrated to the United States, contacted Stefania with a proposal: come to America and start a new life. Stefania and Helena emigrated to the United States in 1949. Stefania married an American man, had children, lived a quiet life in the suburbs. She worked as a seamstress, a modest career that supported her until retirement. For decades, she rarely spoke about the war. When asked, she would simply say, "I did what I could to help." It wasn't until 1979, when Yad Vashem began investigating rescuers during the Holocaust, that Stefania's full story emerged. Survivors she had saved gave testimony. Neighbors in Przemyśl confirmed details. The extraordinary truth was finally documented. In 1980, Stefania Podgorska was honored as righteous among the nations. She and Helena traveled to Israel for the ceremony. "I don't feel like a heroine," Stefania said during the ceremony. "I was only 16. I just did what I knew was right." But the organizers emphasized that this was precisely heroism, doing what is right when every incentive is to do the opposite. The survivors speak. In later interviews, the 13 survivors described the experience of living in Stefania's attic with details that reveal extraordinary trauma and equal gratitude. Ezio Diamant, interviewed in 1985. There are no words to describe what Stefania did. She was 16 years old. 16. The age when teenagers worry about dances and romances. She worried about keeping 13 people alive. She worked until she collapsed, gave us her own food, deceived Nazis who visited her. And she never complained, never said, "This is too much." She just kept going. One mother who hid her 2 children there said, "My children were 4 and 6 when we entered the attic. When we came out 2 years later, they were 6 and 8. Those 2 years were their entire childhood. They learned to be silent, not to cry, to exist like ghosts. No child should learn those lessons, but they learned, and they survived. And all because a 16-year-old girl decided our lives were worth her risk." Helena Podgorska, speaking in 2005, she was 69. "My sister was my heroine before the war, during the war, and after the war. She cared for me when our mother couldn't. She protected me when the Nazis wanted to kill us. She taught me that helping others, even when it's dangerous, is what defines humanity. I was 7 years old, keeping the secret of 13 lives. It was terrifying. But Stefania made me feel brave. She would say, 'You're my partner. I couldn't do this without you.' She made me feel important, capable. The confidence she gave me, the belief in my ability, that shaped who I became." Analysis: how a teenager did the impossible. Stefania Podgorska's rescue operation defies logical explanation. How could a resourceless teenager keep 13 people hidden for 2 years? Factor 1. Youth as an advantage. Paradoxically, Stefania's youth was an advantage. The Nazis consistently underestimated teenagers, especially young women. They could not conceive that a 16-year-old girl could run a sophisticated rescue operation. That underestimation protected her. Factor 2. Absolute routine. The system Stefania developed, brutal as it was absolutely consistent. The same daily schedule, the same food amounts, the same precautions. Consistency reduces mistakes. Factor 3. The relationship with Helena. The cooperation between Stefania and Helena was crucial. Helena never betrayed the secret. She performed perfectly under pressure. That trust between sisters was the foundation of the entire operation. Factor 4. Personal sacrifice. Stefania was literally killing herself to keep 13 people alive. Her weight dropped dangerously. She developed health problems that would affect her for life. Yet she never prioritized her own well-being over the survival of those in hiding. Factor 5. Adaptability. When German soldiers moved into the apartment, many would have collapsed. Stefania adapted, changed routines, found ways to continue. Her mental flexibility was extraordinary. Factor 6. Luck. The element of luck cannot be denied. The Nazis never looked up. The neighbors never reported suspicions. The German soldiers never investigated sounds. One piece of bad luck would have destroyed everything. The personal cost. Stefania paid an enormous price for saving 13 people during the war and after. Physically, she never fully recovered. Malnutrition during critical adolescent years caused lasting damage. Early osteoporosis, chronic digestive problems weakened immunity. Psychologically, she carried the trauma of 2 years living under constant tension. She developed generalized anxiety, never able to fully relax. Nightmares of Nazis discovering the attic haunted her for decades. Helena, too, carried the trauma of a stolen childhood. Though she married and had a successful family, she always felt part of her childhood had been sacrificed. But both sisters insisted they had no regrets. "If I had to do it again," Stefania said in 1990, "I would do the same." Those 13 lives were worth any personal cost. Legacy Stefania Podgorska died in 2018 at the age of 91, having lived a long life in America. Her funeral drew descendants of the 13 people she saved, more than 80 people whose existence depended directly on the decision a 16-year-old made in September 1943. Helena died in 2020 at 84. The story of the Podgorska sisters represents an extreme case of rescue during the Holocaust. An operation maintained not by adults with resources, but by two girls with nothing except courage and compassion. Yad Vashem estimates that the 13 people Stefania saved have produced, across generations, about 250 living descendants. Each exists because a teenager decided that neighbors who needed help were worth risking her own life. The house at Tatarska Street 3 no longer exists, demolished during urban redevelopment in the 1980s. But on the site, there is a memorial plaque. In this place, Stefania and Helena Podgorska, aged 16 and 7, hid and saved 13 Jews during the Nazi occupation. Their courage preserved lives. Their humanity defeats hate. Epilogue. The question. In the final interview before her death, Stefania was asked, "How did you find the courage at 16 to do something adults wouldn't do?" Stefania thought for a long time. "I don't think it was courage. Courage implies overcoming fear. I was afraid every day, every hour. I didn't overcome it. I just decided fear was not a reason to let people die. When I was 16 and 13 people knocked on my door, I could have said, 'I can't.' And it would have been true. I had no resources, no experience, no support. But if I said no, they died. It was that simple. So I said yes. And then every day I said yes again. For 2 years, 730 days, every day I chose to continue. Not because I was brave, but because the alternative was unacceptable. People call this heroism, but heroism is a big word for something simple. Seeing another human being who needs help and providing that help. That's all I did. I helped. And Helena, my little sister, helped too. She was 7 years old, keeping the secret of 13 lives, a child doing an adult's work. But she did it. Because I told her she mattered, that I needed her. Maybe that's the real lesson. Not that I was special, but that anyone, even a 7-year-old, can do extraordinary things if the situation demands it and someone believes in them. The Nazis didn't know 2 sisters aged 16 and 7 were hiding 13 Jews because they couldn't imagine girls could be so capable, so determined, so willing to sacrifice. Their lack of imagination was our advantage. But the truth is, we weren't special. We were ordinary. And that's what makes the story important. Because if we could do it, anyone can. In any era, in any place, when evil happens, ordinary people can choose to resist. You don't need to be strong. You don't need to be rich. You don't need to be an adult. You only need to decide that some things are worth the risk. And then you need to decide that again every day until it's over. Stefania's words may capture the deepest lesson of the Holocaust. Resistance to evil does not require superhuman heroism. It requires ordinary humanity refusing to accept extraordinary inhumanity. 13 people survived because 2 girls decided their neighbors deserved help. 250 descendants exist because a 16-year-old said, "Come in," when every rational reason dictated, "I can't help." The Nazis didn't know. They couldn't know. Their ideology, built on force and domination, could not comprehend the power of compassion operating from a two-room apartment in a Polish city. And in that not knowing, in that underestimation, they lost. Because 13 people escaped their grasp. And over time, 13 became 250. And the defeat of evil, small in scale, was permanent in meaning. An attic 1 meter high, 13 people, 2 girls. A victory the Nazis never saw coming.